to the third. Welcome everyone to the third Wendat lesson by John Steckley, and we're looking forward to it. But before we start, let's acknowledge the territory we're on. So as we're not all gathered in the same space, we recognize that this land acknowledgement might not be for the territory that you're currently on. We ask that if it is the case, you take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory you're on and the current treaty holders. We recognize that many indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. Glendon, as part of York University, acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Toronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. It is now home to many Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and its territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. There we are. And I'm presently really far away from any of these territories, and I believe there isn't any for where I am, but I'll let John start with our lesson. Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with a good greeting in Wendat, which is Kwe Oyataro. Hello, we are friends. Yes. I did that friends last time. So Kwe is a funny term in that a number of people in this area use the term. The Anishinaabe use the term. Wendat do, several of the Haudenosaunee do. So when in doubt, say Kwe. Okay, it's just a little, it's funny because I think people would greet each other with and could understand each other because of the relationships between the people. Okay, so what I'm doing today are color terms and counting terms. And again, message number one, it's verbs. It's done by verbs. Nouns are in second place, verbs are in first place. Now, when you want to ask somebody, well, what color is it? You would say, Tauta Yaatsi. Tauta is a general question word. Yaatsi means it is called. You're going to hear that one a lot. Yaatsi, it is called, right? So, when you move from that to the specific colors, you'll find the same verb is used. It is called. And then you know that you're referring to the color, not the object that has the color. Okay. Now, for the color red, you have Owentaatsi. Owentaatsi. It is called vermilion or red ochre. Now this is interesting, this one for red. It refers to the earth dye they would use to mix with animal fat to color their ceramics, their hair, and their skin. The whole idea that, quote, Indians are red comes from this dye, the Beothuk. The Beothuk are people who lived in Newfoundland, and they had a lot of red ochre. They used it on their canoes, they used it on many of their artifacts, and they used it on their skin and hair. So when the French and the English came to Newfoundland and saw these people, they were red. Hence the English term Red Indian that I've heard a lot. They're not red unless they're really, 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 really embarrassed. Okay, so it's related to that practice. Many people use that. That's one of the most common dyes. And so, of course, for the Wendat, they would use it to mean the color red. Right? Okay, any questions about that so far? Okay, for gray, not surprising, it is u'u'eraatsi, which means it is called ash or it is called ashes. Okay, it is called ash, it is called ashes. And again, the structure is very similar. You have a pronominal prefix, you have a noun root. Most often when you see a noun root, it's in a verb. Nouns don't often stand alone. They're inside a verb. Is a noun root. The next thing we have, or is the noun root. Anyway, so, that's the wrong one. That's the counting one. When the color one is in on the first sheet you were given, or the first collection of sheets you were given. That's okay, no problem. Okay, now for orange, you could probably guess at this time of year what color term they used for orange. They referred to pumpkins. So it's unya sha'atsi. It is called pumpkin. Unyo sha'atsi. It is called pumpkin. One of my favorite Wyandotte stories involves pumpkins. This is kind of a side, but kind of not. There's a Wyandotte trader who is carrying a pumpkin, and someone approaches him and asks him, "What is that?" Obviously not a Wendat, right? Because it's one of the three sisters, right? Corn, beans, and squash or pumpkin. So he says, the trader says, "It is a horse's egg. This will grow into a horse." So he gets a good deal of this from the person that doesn't know what it is. It's a common source in Wyandotte stories about sharp traders, because they were a trading nation. So the ignorant person you're trading with is going to be a favorite story. So he carries this pumpkin egg, and then he's going to a hill, is going down a hill. He drops it and it rolls down to a stump and breaks open. At the same time, a rabbit comes out from behind that. He assumes that the rabbit is the baby horse. So he goes running after it, and believing that, he comes to a town and somebody has to tell him, no, wasn't an egg. Here, let me take you back, right? And he learns that it's really a pumpkin, that horses don't come from eggs. Anyway, so a good trading story. Kids love that story. I really kind of embellish it a lot for there. Now, the next one. So we've done orange, we've done orange, gray, and red. Now for the color blue. The color blue, again, not surprising, is Yarohyatsi, which is, it is called sky. Yarohyatsi, it is called sky. It's of the same structure, although this time it has 5 different parts. Now, sky is a common, that the noun root Yonghya is very commonly used in Wendat names, Wendat and Wyandotte names. There are a lot of names that incorporate the sky. The sky is a player in stories. The sky is a player in the clan stories. There's named he is burning the sky. There's she scraped the sky. Lots and lots of names that involve the sky. So it would be obvious for them to, that would be the color for blue, not water, right? Because the sky is ever present, and the sky is a very important part of the stories and the culture. Now, black. And again, This is the color. This is something that would be used to color things. So there would be a dye made out of this, and the term is yase hasaatsi. It is called charcoal. Yase hasaatsi. It is called charcoal. Because of course that's how they would get the black for coloring things, for painting things. Now, not surprisingly, they called the Jesuits by this name, or a version of this name, because the Jesuits always wore black. So it's a pretty obvious term to use. Oh, yeah. So the term for Jesuits is Hati se hastaatsi. They, masculine, are called black. Hati is used when you're referring to a group of men or a group of men and women. So when you see a lot of the names for different peoples in Wendat, it will start with Hati because it is they mix or they men, right? So Hati se Hanstaatsi, that would be, you'd hear that word a lot once the Jesuits came because that was an association with them. Just like, for example, when they were referring to the Recollet brothers, people like Gabriel Sagal, what they would use for that is not a color, but what they wore on their feet. So you saw a Recollet, you would call him Hoshitayo. He has a naked foot, meaning because they wore sandals, which the Wendat must have thought was distinctive of them and a little strange of them, kind of like how many Canadians talk about people wearing socks and sandals at the same time being strange. So the Wendat, Hoshitayo, he has a naked foot, okay? So people are identified by clear identifiers, and here in both cases, something physical, their coat or their shoe, or their lack of shoe, or their lack of shoe, right? Okay, so again, it's structured in the same way. It's the yeah.
Don, I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you
Oh,
have the handout? Because the handout that we had for this lesson is the counting one, the one that you sent. If
yeah,
you could
that's the
share,
second part. Yeah,
yeah, if
unfortunately,
you had it, that would be lovely.
oh, I'm
Sylvie,
sorry, because I didn't
Sylvie,
print
je
one
t'ai
out.
envoyé.
Yeah, but I don't have it.
Oh,
I don't
well,
have it.
unfortunately,
That's
I
fine.
only have it in my computer now, and I didn't print it up because I,
Okay, I'll look for it, but okay.
yeah, no, it's okay. No, it's okay. It's okay. Now, so now for the word for brown. Now, brown is going to be the word ta, which means clay or mud. Again, it's an important word to the people, and I'm going to tell you why. Anyway, so the word for brown is ya'ataratsi, ya'ataratsi, brown. It is called clay, it is called mud. And the same kind of five-part structure, predominant prefix, noun, joiner vowel, verb root, stative, right? Ah, there we have it.
Yeah, I had it. Sorry.
Ah, no, that's okay. I should have had it. So
Okay.
okay, so you see the first three there. And again, it's this basic structure that they use. This is it has five parts. It's a relatively short word in Wendat. These are relatively short words, except for the one with black, because charcoal is a long noun root. All right, so we get, there's pumpkin. And there we have, it is called sky, and there it is called charcoal. And there we have the term for the Jesuits, right? The hati at the beginning, then the word for charcoal, then the joiner vowel, and then the verb again, and that is in the stative. The stative is the aspect that appears the most often. by far, most of the words, most of the verbs will use the stative when you use them, right? Because it's just talking about this is the way it is. This is the state of things. This is what it is. Okay, so get
John,
down. Yeah,
just a quick question.
sure.
You said, I think, in one of your talk that the Aboriginal people never use this expression black robe for the Jesuit.
No, they didn't use black robe. It was
No.
charcoal. It was,
Charcoal.
yeah, that's why when the movie came out, I did write a criticism of the movie at the time. No, they never called them black robes. They called
Yeah,
them
but
black.
yeah,
They're called black.
Okay.
Yeah, because obviously,
In the Jesuit relation, they use all the time black robe
yes, yeah,
for the Jesuit.
yeah.
Robe noire.
Yeah, sometimes the translations in there are not exact. They take their
Yeah.
interpretation of it. Although a lot of most of the translations are fairly good.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like with that case, it's a bit misleading. Although it refers to the same thing. It refers to their black robes.
Okay.
Okay, now just scroll down to brown. There we go. Now, with brown, that ta or that ta refers to one of the names of the Wyandot was Mud Eater, and it has a story. The Americans were attacking the Wyandot, and the Wyandot had an opportunity to attack them back, and the Americans ran away, including a child, a boy, and the boy ran away and ran into the river and hid in the bulrushes. So when they found him, when the Wyandot found him, he basically had his face in the mud. So that term Mud Eater came out, and it became one of the significant names of the Wyandot, Mud Eater. There were a number of their leaders that were called Mud Eater. So it could just as well be called Clay Eater or any kind of wet earth eater, but it's significant. And one of the villages of the Wendat. Now, when the city of Toronto was looking to, some time ago, to give a name to some places, and they had sort of this open package. I was always trying to add Wendat names to that, but they never liked any of the ones. I think, one of the ones I gave them was a taratiri, which it is supported on clay, it is supported on earth, on mud, right? Which referred to one of the Wendat villages. One of the criticisms from the committee was, oh, it sounds like a computer game because of Atari, right? So there it goes, right? It's sad, but still, it does appear in some of the names, and it's an important word. It's an important noun. Okay, so that's the word for brown. Now, for white, obviously, the word for snow. Yandinya ta'asi. It is called snow. Yandinya ta'asi. It is called snow. So you right away with that, you know that the color white is being discussed, is being talked about. So I'm saying it's this basic structure. There's no word that means color. There's no noun that I know of that means shade, like a shade of it. You would just say it's like this. It is called this. There would probably be other names if it was a particular shade and you wanted someone to be sure they knew what it was. You would say it is called, and then they would get it by what it was identified with. Right? But what you find is that in the Wendat language, they don't have that kind of these abstract collective terms like time. There's no word for time in the language. Right? There's no word that means time. When you ask what time it is, you ask, where is the sun? There's a verb that means the sun to rise, right? It's a very short verb. Yar, that means the sun to rise. So you'd say, where is the sun risen? Right? And that would tell you, or you'd say it's there, that would tell you roughly what time it was. But there's no, like I say, there's no word that means time. I remember I saw a phrase on something as, we save your time. And I thought, you could not say that in Wendat, not at all. The idea of saving time is kind of weird anyway. Like you can't put it in a bag and say, oh, I got this time ready just in case I have to, clear the leaves out of the eaves troughs. I've got this bag of time that I'll spread on the ground. Anyway, okay, so snow. Now yellow. Now, what is interesting here is the same word, the same noun root applies to the sun and to the moon. It's the same. So for yellow, Yandishraatsi, it is called sun, it is called moon. If you really wanted to distinguish between the two, you add to the term, to this term, you would add at night. At night, then you'd know it was the moon. But this term refers to, you could call it sky being, because in their traditional beliefs, in one of the traditional stories, they talk about the sun as a man, the moon, of course, as a woman, right? But the same word is used for both. Okay, so again, it's the color for yellow, the word for yellow. And again, it's the same 5-part structure. Pronominal prefix, noun root, joiner vowel, verb, and stative. Right? Now, one thing I've been talking about pronominal prefixes. One of the things that when you're trying to think about, when you're thinking, okay, what pronominal prefix is used, you have to ask yourself, well, what conjugation is the verb? What conjugation is the noun? There are 5 conjugations in Wendat. These same exist in the other Iroquoian languages. And conjugations are the beginning, are what form does the pronominal prefix take? The most common one, and in the ones I've used here, this is the one most frequently used, is called the consonant conjugation, whereas the noun root or the verb root that comes before it begins with a consonant usually. It has by far the most. So when I talked about hati before as meaning they, masculine or a group, that's the consonant conjugation pronominal prefix, right away. That's it. So we use it a lot. The other is there's words that start with a, and that's a conjugation, not as common, but it's around. The reason I introduced this at this point was because the term for green has an E conjugation noun root, and there are not many of them, but here's one. Then there's yeah and the sound E, that's another conjugation, and then there's O, which is the 5th conjugation. As in Ontario, right? Ontario is an O conjugation noun root, hence its beginning. You don't see the pronominal prefix, it's just part of the root. Okay, now, so green, rutaatsi, it is called plants, it is called grass, right? Orutaatsi, it is called plants. It is called grass. You know it refers to the color green, right? So what I've tried to say with all of this is, it's the most basic thing that is in that color, and then you refer to it. You say, what is its nature? Oh, it's called this, or it is called this. There is a verb to be like something, but it doesn't incorporate nouns, so they don't use that. If it incorporated nouns, they'd probably use it, but it doesn't. Some verbs incorporate nouns, others do not. They always stand alone. Okay, now this isn't on the sheet, but I just thought the verb root atsi is also used when you're asking what somebody's name is. So you use the same question word, tautan. Tautan, atsi is what are you called? What is your name? There is a noun root that means name, and it's used. But if you ask what somebody's name is, tautan, shiatsi, what are you called? And then if you say your name, you give your name first. So I would say, John Yiatsi, John, I am called. Okay. So it's just the verb. You give the name and then the verb. The yia means I. The sh in what are you called? So, and you could do the same for what is he called? You would say Tauta Aatsi. What is he called? What is it? He is called. And for a woman, Tauta Yaatsi. What is she called? And the Ya is the feminine zoic singular, right? So that's how basically that's how the it is called is used for colors and for names. Right? So even though it's a little difficult to pronounce at first because it has that glottal stop that the Jesuits regularly missed because they didn't know a language that had it. And this one, using this verb would teach you a lot about how to use it. Okay, now we move on to counting. Now, counting is done in a very different way from English and French. All of the numbers in Wendat, all of them, except for the numbers 3 to 9, use verbs. The numbers are verbs. Except for the numbers 3 to 9. They're called particles. They're not structured as a noun. They're not structured as a verb. They only have one piece, and that's the name. That makes them a particle. Okay. Now, so we'll go through. There's basically 4 or 5 verbs that you can use, and you can count to incredible heights. It's the Wendat were a trading people, so numbers are going to be very important to them because you're trading X number of this for X number of this. One of the games that they played, one of the games that you find among a good number of traditional indigenous culture is sometimes called the game of sticks or the game of straws. The Wendat version was somebody would say to you, pick up 20 straws, and you had to pick them up quickly. You weren't to count them out individually. You were to pick them up quickly. And you won that, and this is obviously a game often used with kids, you would be able to see very quickly how much they were. Like a journalist would, how many people are in the crowd, right? Mm. Because it's in your interest. Because if you're trading with somebody, say you're trading for beads with the French, you're not going to start counting how many beads there are because it shows you don't trust the people you're trading with. But if you can look at that and say, okay, that's the right amount, everybody's happy. If it's not the right amount, well, then you know not to trust that trader again. Right? But numbers are important. Now, number one, Scott. It was funny. Last time I did a lecture up at, I think it was at St. Marie among the Hurons. I kept joking. No, it was with the Wendat. I kept joking. This one guy's name was Scott. And I said, here is number one. He was also the boss of the others. I said, here's number one, Scott. So pretty much everybody at that session knew what the number one was, right? Because, say, look, the number one just walked into the room, and I used it over and over again because, I use the same jokes a lot. So, okay, now this has an interesting structure because there is something before the pronominal prefix. Now, the S that is in that word is called the repetitive. Now, usually when you see that word, it means very or again. So if you're talking about something being very large, you use the verb to be large plus the repetitive. If you're talking about something somebody's doing and you're saying they're doing it again, that S comes first. I'm not exactly sure why they have it here. It's a little different use, but it's there, right? So Scott, it is one. S being the repetitive pre-pronominal prefix, then the feminine zoic singular agent, then the verb to be one plus to be in a state, right? So it's very easy. Now, one thing that this number verb does that no other number verb does is it incorporates nouns. So you can talk in one word about it being one something, one word. So if you want to say it is one body or she is one body, you're talking about, oh, there's one person there or one animal there. You would use the repetitive again, the feminine zoic singular agent again, and you'd use the noun root for body, then the joiner verb, and then the verb again. So you'd say ska'atan. It is one body. You're talking about about anything that's any living thing, then you use that form, right? If I'm for example, if I want to say one dog, and I'm going to use this term because you probably heard one of my dogs. The word for dog is yanniyan, which means it barks a lot. That is, which applies very much to Ross, our Labradoodle. He's a bark. He's learned recently to whine. I prefer barking to whining, but yeah, he barks a lot. Anybody shows up in our neighborhood, particularly somebody with a dog, he's truly yanniano. Oh, howling too. He does that. Yeah, he's a very verbal dog, And yeah. No, I'm not done now. So, okay. So, and for if you say one deer, you'd say Alskenonton skiatan, one deer, right? So the name for the animal, and then that it's one of that animal. It's also a verb form that you see here. You can use it for a name. So Skahonat, it is one canoe, is a male name. I can't remember. I think I can't remember what clan it is. I think it's Deer Clan, a Deer Clan name. Okay. But and I don't know whether I included the female name Skawendat, which means she is, or it is one voice. one word, right? Because the noun wind means voice or word. And it doesn't, just to reiterate something I may have said in the first class, we do not know what the word Wendat means. If you see in writing given meaning, it's wrong. I wrote a whole article on all the guesses people made and why they're wrong. I kind of wish that I'd come up with something for an answer, but just to say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, it's not what I like to do generally. Being a man, I don't like to say I don't know. Okay, to use that old line. Okay, now, there is no noun that means number. There is no noun that means number. There is a verb. There is a verb. If I want to say how many are there, like if somebody's asking me how many birds we have, to iwaye. Ye means to number. So to iwaye, how many are there? Okay, to iwaye, how many are there? Now this uses another pronominal, a pre-pronominal prefix. That's the big loud bird there. It may swear. I don't know who taught her that. Anyway, it's called the partitive, and it means such, such. So it numbers such is iwaye. Yeah, 4-part word. Wa, a, ye, and he. It numbers such. If I want it, if you ask me how many are there, like if you asked how many cats I have, I would say Scott Iwaye, 1. Scott Iwaye, there is 1. There is 1. It numbers 1. She's outnumbered by all the other animals. Okay, so, and all right, so again, that number, that is the first verb that refers to numbers. Now, the second verb that refers to numbers is the verb to be two, to be two. Now, this verb says two a number of times. In fact, this verb has 3 things that say you're dealing with two here. Okay? 3 things that say that. The word is tondi. The te at the beginning is called the dualic. It means two. Now, it can be used when you're talking about, counting 2 things. It also, if you talk about doing something with 2 feet, like running or walking on snowshoes, and other such things. Oh yeah, standing. If you're talking about standing, you use the dualic because you do it with 2 feet. Right? There are other more abstract things that are TUI. Sometimes there's TUI things for things that are uncertain. Whether, it has maybe a dangerous possibility, you might use that. Okay, so Taundi then starts with a dualic. Then it uses the dual agent, the feminine zoic dual angel, and, right? So it talks about 2. The Wendat, like many languages across the world, distinguishes between the plural and the dual. Right? It's not an unusual thing. Worldwide, a number of languages do it. Some of the old European languages, I can't remember which right now, have that distinction between 2 of something and more than 2. Then there's the verb e, which means to be 2. And then in a state. So 3 times we're told This is a two thing, right? So you definitely know someone's talking about two because it's said three times. Now, if you want to talk about to somebody, if you want to say we are two, you would use the dualic. You would use the we two form. Again, the verb to be two and be in a state. So te, we, you and I are two. We, you and I. It's the inclusive. I think I talked about that in one of the workshops. The inclusive includes the listener in the we. The opposite of that is the exclusive. If I want to refer to somebody that's not the person I'm talking to and saying, you know, we are two, I would say te andi. The and being we two exclusive. So we two. Okay, and so we have that there. So you see, and then as I said, if you want to say he is standing, you would say tehat. With te again, with H, A meaning he, and T meaning to stand, right? And then, as I said, things that have two arms or two legs, or sorry, two eyes or two legs, you pretty much automatically, not all the time, but you pretty much automatically use the dual. Okay, as I said, the numbers 3 to 9 are particles. I won't really deal with them. Now, the next verb is the verb to be 10, ase. Ase means it is 10, right? It is 10. Okay, so if you can ask the question with this verb, I don't think I wrote it down there. You can ask a question, how many tens are there? If you're referring to something and you expect there will be a lot, you ask how many tens are there? Right? So you'd say, to iwasen, how many tens are there? Now, in this case and in some others, we're using that such thing again. Now, for 20, you would say tondi tewasen. You would use the dualic in both cases. Tondi tewasen. There are two tens, there are 20. So for every one of the 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, there's the word for the number, and then there is the verb to be 10. So for 30, ashank iwasen. 3, there is such a number of tens. 3, there is such a number of tens, right? So it is, you know, say that's the verb that you use. Now, the next verb, and this may seem a little strange, is a verb that means to add to. It adds to whatever you use it. You put a number in front of it, and then it says, "Oh, you're adding this." So now in the numbers 11 to 19, and I guess, I mean, this is a short form. This is a nice way, short way of doing it. You don't mention the number 10, right? So you notice the number 11, the number 10 isn't there. What you're saying is it is one added, implied that it's 10, that the one is added to, right? Scat iskare, it is one added. Okay, now for 20, or sorry, for 12, you would say tondi Tescare. Right? Tescare. 20. Now, so now I didn't mention it before, but in some numbers, you have 4 verbs. In really complicated numbers, you have 5 verbs. For the number 21, for example, you'd say tande te wasen, which means 2 tens, then scat 1 escare. So tande te wasen scat escare, which means 2 tens, 1 added. So it makes sense. It has a predictable order. It's just a lot longer than saying 21. But hey, that doesn't matter. Now, any questions about that? Okay. Hundreds. There are a couple of ways of saying 100. My favorite way of saying 100 is Eliot Iwasen. Fingers standing, such a number of tens. So such a number of tens, right? So you have your 10 fingers up, and that means 100. So it has one of the verbs to stand in it, is that how it ends. So Eliot, is just, it has the verb ut, which is a verb to mean to stand, but doesn't refer to things that have 2 legs. So fingers don't have 2 legs, therefore no dualic. Okay. Now, here's a verb, here's a word. I don't think I presented it there. That has 5 verbs. 5 verbs to say 111. Eliot iwasen, 100. Asen, 10. Scott iskare. So if you want to say 111, Eliot iwasen, Asen Scott iskare. So that's long. That's a long, maybe a small number, but it's long, right? Now for the number 1,000, right? They have a number for 1,000 as well, a verb for that. Well, it's not so much the verb with this one, it's the noun. The noun to be rapids, right? So 1,000 is skangwats. It is 1 rapid, because in rapids you have many things repeating each other. It's a high number of things. I would have thought they would use corn for that, because you have fields of corn, right? But no, rapids, right? So skangwat. So the S, the repetitive, is used again because it's 1. It's an it, the noun root for rapids, the joiner vowel, and the verb to be 1. Now, if you want to talk about 2,000, you would say Teyangwaye. It is 2 rapids. And again, you have the dualic, you have the pronominal prefix, the noun root meaning rapids, and then that verb again to number. So if you're talking about a high number, you're going to be building something pretty large. It's going to be a long word, but that's okay. Because, well, it wasn't a long word, it would be a long sentence, right? But no trouble to it. But so you can see that again, verbs do the job. As always, verbs do the main job. When I've created a Wendat dictionary, and you'll see a big long list of verbs. Well, actually what I do is, and the Jesuits started this, and people that work with Iroquois languages do this. You base it according to conjugation, A, consonant, E, E-R-A, and O, and then you go by root. So the dictionaries for Iroquois languages are by roots, which is the best way of doing it, I think. You give the root, and then you say words that are built off of that root. Otherwise, you'd have a lot of things beginning with ya, right? So this way is a little, makes more sense. But it's interesting, the Jesuits developed this system in the 17th century. Iroquois linguists are using it in the 21st century because it works. My dictionaries are 5 conjugations in order of the roots, and then in English and what translates from there, right? And that's generally how the dictionaries are done. It's practical, and everybody uses it, so you know what's happening there. You say, okay, this isn't a problem. Okay, so any questions about anything you have learned about the language or wanted to learn and expect me to talk about, but I didn't? So any questions?
Yes, Lélia.
Lélia?
Lélia, tu es en sourdine.
Yes, you said you could not. Hello.
Hello. Kwe.
Bonjour. So you said that you could not retrace the meaning of the word Wendat. Did you say that?
Yes, yeah. It's people have tried, and it looks so Wendat, but I believe it's a shortened down version of something longer.
Because in what I read, they say it is the people, le peuple de l'île, the people of the island.
Yeah, because the word Wend means island. But the problem with that is it shouldn't begin with a W.
Mm-hmm.
And standing, the verb, could be standing. So islands, their island standing, it doesn't quite work. None of them quite work. I want it to be exact, You could also use word, because the word word is also wind. So, I can't be sure. I mean, I want to be sure about something, and there's no way. Sure, but yeah, that's what people write.
And the root of the Wendat is Iroquois. C'est la langue iroquoise.
Yeah, they speak an Iroquois language, so you can see the cognates in the language. Tuscarora is a little bit hard because they were farther away, and they were driven out by the American settlers, and they were asked to join the Confederacy by the Oneida. So they have N where the other languages have T, and they have T where the other languages have N. So it confuses me. But yeah, it's also more distantly related, very distantly related, Cherokee. Cherokee. But try to find cognates. It's really hard. But yeah, so it's related, but basically, and of course, St. Lawrence Iroquoian, the word that the language that gave us Canada village and gave us Hochelaga at the Beaver Lodge is also related. And in Dagal's dictionary, there are lots of St. Lawrence Iroquoian words because a good number of them joined the Wendat when they were dispersed.
So it's interesting. So their roots are the root of those language really can be situated in the Appalachian, les Appalaches.
Well, I don't know where the languages first developed. They probably, I mean, obviously they came east and hit the ocean and came up. I would suspect, yeah, they had spent time in the Appalachian. I would expect that. But sometimes I find, like, one of the things that's interesting to me is that the term for corn in Wendat is the same term. Like, they didn't always have corn, right? There's a pre-corn culture. Now, the term for corn that the Wendat have is cognate with the term that the Seneca and Cayuga have. The Seneca and the Cayuga are the farthest west of the Haudenosaunee. They all use the same term that comes from a word for seed. The Mohawk and Oneida, who are the farthest east, use another term for seed, which is really interesting. One of the things that continues to, I want to get, but I can't, the Wendat have a unique word for beans. Nobody else has that word. No other Iroquois language has that word. I've tried to find it, and because the beans developed, and I'm trying to find, somebody, they were the last of the three sisters to come to the people, right? It was corn, and then squash, and then beans. And then beans, when the coming of beans, then their population grew, because beans enable corn to be more nutritious. So they had a more nutritious diet once they had the three sisters. So their population grew once they had beans. And I think it made the corn soup a lot better too, but that's me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question, Lelia. Okay, we have another question from Jan Martin. Yeah.
Well, I have a question, but the fact that you mentioned the three sisters and beans gives rise to another question, and that is, are you aware of the Wendat history of what are called now Three Sisters Gardens, which seem to be self-irrigating gardens with vertical, vertical parts of stumps of wood placed vertically that allow for the aquifer to osmose up to the surface, and they don't require any watering. There's an example of that in Don Mills Collegiate near where we are here at Glendon. And
oh, wow. I didn't know that. I went to Don Mills. They didn't have that then.
Maybe you're the origin of it. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it seemed that it was given them by a Mississauga elder who learned it from the Wendat, he said. Oral history.
Yeah.
What truth is there in that story?
Well, at the time of first contact, they weren't doing that, as far as we know. They had small hills, and on the small, partially they had small hills because if you have an early frost and you're living up in Midland where they have an early frost, if it's on the top of a small hill, it's less likely to feel, because the cold air goes down, right? It's more likely to have it gives them a longer growing season. And you can use, the beans can go up the corn stalks and the squash are around them. So they're all together like that. The use of the stump, I don't think it was a general practice at that time. I may be wrong, but I've never heard of it as being a practice in the 17th century.
Okay, so my real question was this. Mary Jane Norris, in her latest chapter of the future of Indigenous languages in Canada, refers to Wendat as the only secondarily surviving language because transmission was interrupted through native speaker intergenerational transmission. Yeah. And yet, largely because of, I'd say, the Jesuits and your work, John, there are learners today. For example, the Yowenda project in the
That's right. Yeah.
And so forth. So my very touchy question is, how do you see your role in the historic flow of and maintenance of Wendat through history?
Well, partially it's in what I've written. The Sagao book, what I think is a Brebeuf dictionary of the 1640s, and then a general one, which of course in my version has lots of writing over it because I've changed my opinion. I see it as someone who I'm outside the culture. I worked for the Wendat for 5 years as a tribal linguist. That was good, but unfortunately, with not being able to go back to Oklahoma, it kind of cut me off, right? But I see it as working with the people but also just for the people, showing this is important. The fact that I write about it and use it and present sessions like this, I'm saying it's important. My life is, I've been working with the language for 45 years. My life is saying that this language is important. So I think that basic statement, the fact that I do that, plus it gives me things to say to people who cut me off on the highway. And they don't know what I'm saying. And there's no F in Wendat, so I'm okay. So I see that as my role. I mean, the people are working on and I think it's good that they're developing it. Like the Wendat of Wendake are doing it themselves, and they don't have to depend. I mean, I gave them sessions in the 1990s, right? But they don't have to depend on themselves. But I mean, don't have to depend on an outside person, but they work on it themselves, which is good. And I've got one book that should be coming out early next year called The Names of the Wyandot. This is why I often mention names. I've got over 600 names of theirs, and it tells the story of the names. And I've never seen anybody ever do that. Write a book about the names of an indigenous people. I've also got a manuscript, The Names of the Wendat, which is kind of different. I think it's only 200 and some names, 300 names, but still it's that same idea. The names have to persist. In the 19th century, for Wyandot names, all of a sudden they're forced to have surnames, right? Because they're in full contact with European culture, so settler culture. So what happened is a lot of the masculine names, male names, became surnames. And some of them in translation, like Mud Eater. Bearskin is another one. It became not the current chief of the Wyandot of Oklahoma, but their prior chief. His last name was Bearskin, and it was a translation of a man's name, which is great, which is great. But still, they had to go through that whole thing of losing a lot of the names. But still, because the names were well recorded in Pache's writing of the 18th century and Barbeau in the early 20th century, he recorded a lot of the names, the Wyandot names. And it was great. It was great. As George Siwe often says to me, we are both sons of Marius Barbeau. And we are. I wrote one of the books I'm most proud of is 40 Narratives of the Wyandot People. I took Barbeau's stuff that he collected in 1911, 1912, that was published by the museum after he stopped working for the museum. I don't think he was happy about that. I improved the translations. I did more of a part analysis, and it got published early this year, last November. And I'm really proud of that because they're the names, the words are in the context of the stories. So you see what things mean. So it's another connection with linking the culture in the language, because the two are so linked, so incredibly linked.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Times fly so quickly. Any other question?
No. So yes, I was wondering, we still don't know about January for those lessons. We're still working on it. But
good.
if you do, I'm not talking to you, John. I'm talking to your students. If you want more, could you please write to us so that we can send a message higher up and get more support?
To the sky, right? Yeah.
Yeah, to the
Yeah,
sky.
well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But yes, it would be lovely if you, and if you know of anyone who couldn't be here today and who would love to get more, that's the thing to do. So please do that. Send us a little message saying we want more of John. And we will forward the message. But John, we will find a way of having you around anyway.
I'm really pleased.
It'll be
That's
a
fantastic.
noon talk or whatever, but maybe not lessons, but you will be back for
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
I
Good.
promise.
Good. That makes me very happy. That makes me very happy.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Thank you
John,
very
thank
much
you
to
so
everybody.
much for those fascinating 3 lessons. It was great.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Also happy holidays.
And take care with everything that's going around.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If you intended to travel, think twice.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much, John. Happy holidays to everyone.
Yeah.
And for those of you who have to grade, it'll soon be over.
This too shall pass, yes.
Yeah. That's the
Okay.
bad part of teaching.
That's right. I don't miss it at all, that part.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Merci, Marie-Christine. Merci, John. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you probably in January.
Next year.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.